All right, good morning, everybody. It's 8:30, and we'll call this morning's meeting to order for Tuesday, April 20th. And our first item is the approval of the agenda, and we do have one addition, which is a request to approve the appointment of Rory Schmitz as the new Director of Technology Services.
I'll make a motion to approve with the agenda addition.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Mojo, second by Commissioner Ebinger. And just to note, we will put that agenda addition item right after number 7 on the agenda. So with that, any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried. Citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard this morning? Nothing online?
No, Mr. Chair, we do not.
All right, thank you. All right, approval of bills and vouchers.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Kaylee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Okay, next is our 8:35 weekly update for COVID-19. Kathy and Jamie is here again. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I handed out the current information for our data for this week. So you can see that our cumulative cases are up just a little bit. Our cumulative deaths, we have 90 now. Last week we reported 89, but there's a delay in the death report, particularly for this one. So the death was actually from November. So I'm not sure, can't explain how they missed that or how that didn't get recorded. So it wasn't a recent death. It was a death that happened a number of months ago. So they've just put it on the data now. The out of isolation is, correlates with the active cases and those that are out of isolation that recovered. So our active cases, last week we reported 319. So as you can see, this week it's 257. So that's good that we're seeing it go down a little bit. The median age is still 33 for our cumulative cases. Excuse me. Hospitalizations are up. The admissions are up a bit. There's still a little bit of an uptick in hospital cases throughout Minnesota. In the local hospitals across the river, they're still at a manageable rate. We had a few cases from Clay County that were actually in our hospitals in Fargo, and then one that was in ICU. But we haven't seen the large increase that they're seeing across Minnesota. And then our 14-day case rate, and you'll notice that it did go up since the last report last week. So it was 40.45 last week. It's 59.23. But as you see, the case rates are delayed. It's quite a bit after the fact. So this only goes through April 3rd. So this would correlate with the increase in our cases. So we really anticipate that next week we'll see that 14-day case rate go down. So it's a delayed figure. So you can just, anticipate that we'll see a decrease with the active cases decreasing. And then the graph is showing, of course, as you look at the graph, you see, the uptick in March and then in April. So we're hoping again that there will be a bit of a decline there. Our active cases by age on the second page. So the graph is showing that it's the 20 to 39, 34-year-olds, and then the 35 to 39 is up there a little bit too. So we're seeing the number of active cases. And if you look at the side of the graph, it's the number of cases. In this graph, it's 0 to 35. So last week when we looked at it, the number of cases are a bit different because we were way over the 35 or 31. So this is, typical of what our active cases look like, but those are the age ranges we're seeing this week. Cumulative cases, again, are the 20 to 24 age range for the cumulative cases. And then we've really talked about the hospitalizations, again, that there's a few, but they have not seen the increase like we have across the state of Minnesota. And then we talked about the death that was just reported as a delayed report. Any questions on the data?
Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Mojo.
Got a question. I follow several other counties throughout Minnesota and have noticed that some counties are releasing active cases per zip code. And I have heard different stories that MDH really doesn't want us to do that, or that data is not really available. I think having that out there would probably be helpful so that folks can see where the hot pockets in Clay County would be. Can you talk about if that's even available, those percentages?
Initially and actually we talked about that early on where Minnesota Department of Health did not want to give that data because, they know there's active cases all over, and sometimes you see the pockets, but you may not see some of the other ones based on who's getting tested. I can look into that to see how much work it would be to get it per zip code, and so I can find out if we can get that information from Minnesota Department of Health.
Thank you. I think it would probably, as we continue to look at local plans and moving forward, it would probably be a helpful tool for businesses, but especially the school districts, to see not only what numbers, they know the numbers that they have within the schools, but they don't necessarily know community-wide, and it might be a possible tool to have.
We provide all of the data to all of the schools, K-12, and then also all of the higher ed, so they're seeing this directly each week. We're sending that to them. So, but I'll check into that, Commissioner Mojo.
Okay. I am here to report on the efforts of public health and vaccinating, and I just want to say, Commissioner Campbell, that we did request that age breakdown for vaccine, and the state has informed us that they can give that to us by next meeting. And so we'll bring that for your request.
All right.
But basically, we are continuing to lag behind in the percentages of those compared to the state average, although each week we talk about the number of Clay County residents who are vaccinated in pharmacies on the North Dakota side, and that information is not coming into the data that we have to share here, so it's kind of a partial picture. Basically, looking at the number of people with at least one dose of vaccine, Clay County is at 37.8% of the population, as opposed to the state at 50%. And the total number of people with a completed vaccine series in Clay County, 28.9%, compared to Minnesota's 36.9%. People aged 50 to 64 with at least one dose in Clay County, 46.8%, and Minnesota 56.5%. And people aged 65 with at least one dose, 73.8%, and 85.4% at the Minnesota level. And then the total vaccine provided by Clay County Public Health alone to date, 12,986. And our total for last week is 1,090 doses, and the great majority of that, close to 1,000, was second doses. Based on the request for first doses, we did request less vaccine this week. We have very little second doses, but we have a total of 626 doses that we'll be giving this week. There's a delay in shipping, so we will have our first clinic in the evening on Wednesday. So we have requested a very small amount of Pfizer vaccine to serve the 16 and 17-year-olds, and so we're doing a clinic from 4:30 to 6:30 to accommodate them, and communicating that through the parents. We also, before we were able to get vaccine, have shared all of the resources on the Minnesota and North Dakota side. Sanford and Essentia have been doing evening clinics on the North Dakota side, so we've made sure that that information was shared with the schools as well. So we're hoping a larger percentage of them have been vaccinated, but we do have some available this week. And then we have a Thursday clinic for 250 first doses, and we also have a Friday clinic for 250 second doses. And so that is our plan for this week.
So Jamie, I have a couple of questions for you. I happened to be on social media earlier this morning, and I saw on there where a comment was made, or a post was made, that there's been hundreds of folks in Minnesota that have gotten the virus after having the vaccination. And I guess I looked for public health for that, and granted, when the vaccination came out, especially the first two, they said that it was maybe 95% effective. That means there's 5% that probably isn't, right? So I guess from my standpoint, I would like to, if you have access to additional information moving forward, because I think most of this the conversation now is about vaccine when it comes to COVID. And so it would appear to me that the more realistic numbers that we can provide the public, probably the less concern there might be. That's my feeling anyway, is that the numbers would show that. So I don't know if we have the ability to, can we get the data that shows how many people have been infected after having the vaccination and what percentage that is to the total people vaccinated? I think that's important for people to know, because they read this and they become skeptical. But I think up front, we've been up front all along in this, that the percentages aren't 100%. It's not 100% there. But I would guess that the numbers that would have been reinfected are even far below the 5% that, in that 95% range. So if you could maybe help us with that regard, just for public information, I think it would be.
We do know, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, there is a lower percentage than 5%, because we've heard that from the state. There are a number of people across the state that are getting the virus again after being fully vaccinated. So there's a few hundred, I don't know an exact number, but it's well below the 5%. So it's not alarming, but we'll get you the exact figures.
Yeah, and I think it's important to track that, because the questions keep coming, and not only that then, but that those that do end up being infected after having the vaccination, how many of them end up hospitalized versus, and compared to how many might have been hospitalized before. I think it's critical to know all the pieces to this. So, I don't know that it was, like they said, these vaccines were never going to be 100% guarantee, but they were certainly supposed to be 100% from being very ill.
Correct.
Right? That's
Right.
what had been out there. And is there anything that has changed that?
Sure, and thank you, Mr. Chair. That information, we can request it. It's not provided, but we can certainly request it through the epidemiologist at MDH. So we'll get that information.
Well, I just,
Yep.
Trying to gauge a little bit of the pulse of the public. These are the questions that are being asked, or there's theories being presented based on information that I don't know is accurate.
Correct. Yes.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We'll be sure to get what we can from them.
Okay.
One more comment, please.
Yes.
It's also important to note that the more of us that are vaccinated, the more we can protect those that don't gain as much immunity from the vaccine. So those who are immune compromised, or those that are elderly, aren't able to fully reach that 94% themselves. So they rely on the rest of us to protect them as well. So.
Okay. Yes, Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you. Early last week, I received an email from our children's school from the superintendent that talked a little bit about vaccinations moving forward, and that in the future, if there is a close contact with your child, if your child has a vaccine, there probably will not be the required quarantine rate that, you know, we've seen in the past 6 months, if and when they open it up to kids. How are we looking at our policy, working with Darren and Steve on staffing and how those staff quarantines will or will not happen based on vaccinations of our employees? Is that something, we're having those conversations now, or?
I think we're having those today, aren't we? And
Yeah,
pick-
Mr. Chair and Commissioner
Darren?
Mojo, yeah, we had one conversation, just in general about the
Great.
remote policy, but we'll have more.
I think, Commissioner Mojo, I think your questions are good, and I think we have it on our agenda for today's
deal.
personnel issues.
Well, I think it's important. You know, I certainly feel that we'll have to come out of this pandemic at some point. It's how we plan as safely as possible to do that. I think we've proven that we can still do business, even though we've had some limitations. So I would certainly feel like encouraging our staff to have a vaccination will help going forward.
Thank you. And one other comment, we all know that there's vaccine hesitancy. We hear about that, and there is a lot of information out there that maybe isn't accurate, or there's a lot of conspiracy theories. So we want to make sure that we get the accurate information out, and there's a request to get information to all of our churches, you know, to just, you know, get a wide sweep and provide more accurate information. And so our public information officers from Public Health are working also with the public information officers from Fargo. So the intent is to kind of cover all of the churches across our metro area. So we're actually currently in the process of getting that information out to them. So that's another opportunity for us to provide information to the public.
Excellent. Any more questions or comments? Anything from Kathy and Jamie? Anything else? All right, well, thank you
Thank
for your
you.
continued good work.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Kathy, you're still gonna have another,
I was afraid to leave.
we're not done with you yet, are we? All right, we have a request for approval for a grant award from Minnesota Department of Health. And Rory and Kathy are here to talk about that. Good morning, Rory.
Morning, how are you?
Very good. It's a Tuesday morning. How
Yes.
could we not be good?
Yes, exactly. So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we sent just a little bit of a information sheet that talked about, just very briefly, Rory will fill in all the information about the new grant, the amount that we received, and kind of the work. So I'll let Rory talk about all the details of this new grant that that Rory and his team had written and that we received.
Well, in the grant writing world, which we live in that world a lot, rarely does this happen. We submitted a grant for a comprehensive suicide prevention back in early 2019. And we thought we had a strong application. Unfortunately, we weren't one of the two that were chosen. However, we had secured some other smaller funding from the United Way locally and some private funders that allowed us to do some of that work. And we had relationships with the folks at MDH that were leading this work at the state level. So about 2 months ago, we got an email that said they had secured some additional funding and they would like us to submit a work plan, and they would then fund us for 3 of the initial 4 years of this grant. So it's a $330,000 grant for the remaining, it's about actually 2.5 years, 80,000 of which will go to help fund a person to coordinate the work. And we have contracted staff already that works for us, who's leading our suicide work, who would continue in that capacity. And there's some work that's required for evaluation, about $10,000 a year. And then the rest is for the strategies that have been identified in the initial assessment and evaluation. And so we're here to answer any questions and ask for approval for this grant.
I think this is excellent.
Yeah, and so the partners, it would be mostly with rural Clay County at this point. It would include Moorhead. With the suicide work we had done previously, it was largely focused on law enforcement. For the last 4 years, I've been working with law enforcement to initiate and use a simple suicide screening tool to help triage folks and get them to the appropriate level of care. And went from that not being used to about 400 uses a year ago and 1,300 last year. So that's a tool that's really expanded. And so our hope is that we can continue this work to more sectors of Clay County. And we have a partnership, we have an initiative called Rethink Mental Health that has been funded for the last 6 years, and it serves Clay and Cass County because we have so many partner organizations that work in and serve both. And so we do have some carryover funding from the United Way that'll allow us to do some work with Cass County with this Clay County funding that we're getting from DHS as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, obviously this is an issue that needs constant attention. These numbers over the years are rising and not going down, so I think it's very important that we have the ability to do what we can to help lower those numbers and get people in the right positions to get help. Commissioner Ebinger.
Rory, have you gotten any feedback from law enforcement, from the sheriff or from Chief Monroe about the impact of the new ordinance or new statute that the state has? Causes some concern about whether officers are even going to be able to respond to in-home suicide threats where no crime has occurred and nobody's in an immediate danger. Is there any change you see on that would impact on either effect or tracking?
I've been part of a conversation with Officer Schroeder, and I coordinated with our mobile crisis unit and social services. I think it's to be determined at this point. Still kind of fact-finding and seeing what others are doing with regard to that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the grant.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you. All right, next we have our presentation on our capital improvement grant. Joel Olson. Good morning, Joel.
Yes, good morning. I got, everybody have a copy? I have some bigger ones if you need.
Yep.
Okay. All right, good morning, Mr. Chair and board members. You have in front of you the proposed facility capital plan that was asked to put together here. And right now, I guess today's goal is to just be information only. We met with the board or the building committee to take a look at this plan, and I think they felt we needed to at least bring this back and keep you in the loop on this. So I know about a month ago you gave me approval to hire an engineer to help me take a look at this whole plan and make sure that it's done right and everything. That's come back and it was very helpful. So I guess, Mr. Chair, I guess we would just go line by line.
Yeah, I think I would like to, like you to do that for the board, just to, just kind of a high level
Yep.
on each one.
Yep, I won't get too deep into it, and then feel free to interrupt me or ask questions at any time. So, as you can see, I have it broken out into 3 different priorities. Priority 1, 1 to 3, and priority 2, 3 to 5, and priority 3 is 5 to 10. So we got a 10-year plan here put together. The first building on the list here is the courthouse, and under priority one, you can see a couple of these on this plan are highlighted yellow. These are the two that, there's two of them on here that I've kind of identified as a critical need, and I'd like to take care of as soon as I can on that one. But the first one is a heat pump tower replacement, coming in at $300,000. This is a tower on top of the roof that is aged and is leaking and having problems. So there's a sewage pump that's a major pump down in the basement here. There's two of them. This is for price for one. We've replaced one a few years ago. HVAC controls at $20,000 came in. These are just general controls that control this whole building. Asphalt chip seal project, I have $50,000 in there allocated. We got a quote we've put a lot of asphalt on the campus in the last couple of years. This is the maintenance of it to have it hold up long-term. Carpet and paint, remaining 2,002 areas. These are just basically, when the addition was put on, this was the carpet put in at the time. These are basically in all the courtrooms, the hallways. It's the remaining carpet that we haven't taken care of prior to that. County attorney expansion needs fit up. That's a plan that's kind of forthcoming. I'm working with Brian on that one as far as their needs and what they need. So no price on that one. Courts remodel request, this is that one that I came and we went through. It's $128,000 that we are currently working on right now to get Janelle's crew over here downstairs. I guess important to note that's one that we have funded out of Fund 19, and we've mentioned to replace that if future funding has happened. Third floor courtroom remodel. So we've allocated $500,000. We've gotten a quote on what it would take to build a courtroom across the hall here. I believe it's called the 6th courtroom, as that would be needed. So I got a quote on that, but obviously that's a big ticket one that needs a lot of conversation on. Okay, and then on priority 2, we got a fire detection panel and detectors around this building. Obviously it's aged right now, and that's at $57,000. So moving down to land swap, I added this on here. This wasn't on the last copy I gave you just because I felt it was a significant event, I guess, that's needed to be added. I have, for the storage facility, I've added $500,000. This is a number that I've put in there, but we have currently we're waiting on numbers coming back on what a 10,000 square foot facility would cost to build. So, I anticipate adjusting that number as that cost comes in. That's above and beyond what we would get in the land swap. So we're trying to analyze that as well. And then I put in there the land, the 3 acres at $81,000 for that. Other than that, Juvenile Center, just a note there, James, I work separately with him. I just put it on here so we have it to look at, but he has his own capital plan and his own funding, sources of funding that he uses, but I wanted to add it on there so at least it's noted there.
Is that one, that $150,000, would that be Clay County's share? Or is that the total project cost?
That would be to replace the third floor only. That's, yeah, secure, so that would be.
So that's the total price of the.
Yes, of the project itself, yep.
So we would be paying a portion of that $150,000, right, Steve?
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm not real familiar with this issue, but if it's secure only, that would be a funding that would come out of the secure program, and the 33%
Right.
wouldn't be a responsibility of the county.
Yeah. What I'm getting at, though, is our 10-member counties would help pay for.
That's correct.
Yep. Okay, moving on to the Family Service Center. I put together a list of door hardware projects. All 3 doors, main entrances into the building, need to be replaced along with handicap. They come in at $15,000 a piece, so they add up. And then with some rekeying of the building, has not been done in years. And then we have an HVAC project here coming in at $300,000. So this is a good example of what that study allowed me to take a look at. We have 11 air handlers in this project, and to replace them all brand new is about $2 million. So, this study allowed me to kind of take a better look at a retrofit type scenario, which I feel is a good project. It cost around $300,000. So, And then we got some HVAC controls, basically software that controls the whole building at 50,000. We have a tank down in the B9 tunnel down in the service center that needs replaced at 26,000. And then, as you see, I have some blue highlighted areas within this plan. I know I've mentioned it before, but the idea of the blue is to identify that these are master plan type scenarios that haven't quite played out, but could have some costs in the future. So I've added a family service center security plan. I've had some talks and concerns with Kathy and Rhonda on the security of that building. I think the building committee right now is taking a deeper look on plans for that and what is needed. Master plan contingency dollars under the family service center. I guess below that is the detox plan. I'm kind of just throwing in some dollars there, knowing that, if detox did leave at some point and went and had another facility, that could trigger some moving around, and the ability to rent the building would cost some money to fit up there. So I've just allocated some money there. And then, of course, the detox plan there. If you look over to priority 2 under the family service center, I have some bathroom remodels. I've had a lot of feedback on the bathrooms being old, and so I've put some dollars in there for that. Just new floors, paint job, new stuff like that. So, and then the detox elevator upgrade. That's one of those that should detox leave, that price tag leaves pretty much. We would abandon it, and it's not needed anymore. So, questions so far? I know I'm kind of going through them quick. Power plant, we have a tank that holds all the diesel, I guess, that powers up the building on the generator and also with the boilers. It's in tough shape at $30,000 there. We have an industrial air compressor at $20,000 that controls all the heat valves in the family service center. And then we have a generator that is, I think it's a 1982 model. It's in poor shape. This powers up the family service center and also the power plant that helps the jail and the family service center. So other than that, I'm going to bounce down to just DMV. Just a note, DMV lease ends in 2024. That's just for something to consider. And then down in the highway, I've met with Dave and his crew on all their needs as well. So they have some master air units throughout their facility that need replacing at $50,000. They have a joint LED lighting project with MnDOT. This would be their share of that cost. And then he's expressed his concerns on the Ulen shop is in poor shape, and Comstock as well. Ulen is worse than Comstock, but I've put some dollars in there for that. And then he's got some miscellaneous lists around the county on all the small shops that he'd like $100,000 put in there. And then a joint facility parking lot in the back. I think they get a lot of roots under phase prior to here. They get a lot of roots and stuff from the heavy haul, so they'd like to do some paving behind their shop there. And then they have a joint project with that salt shed storage. Some of those tents that you can see off the highway there need replacing. So that's kind of a quick little overview of everything. I just wanted to throw you, obviously you can see the grand total. I think the goal is to go back to the building committee and do a thorough vetting of each and every one of these projects. And
Joe, first thing I want to address is your 2 biggest immediate concerns, where you highlighted them in yellow.
yes, yep.
Are those time and weather sensitive to get done within a certain period of time?
We have a contingency plan. I'd like to get it done this summer if I could, or fall time. It doesn't necessarily have to be the summer, but I guess I'd like to have it done before the winter hits. They're not long projects. They don't take a while to do, so.
So I think that part of what we wanted to do today was to have this shown to all of you in case there's something that you may have heard of, or you might have something that we may have missed that you think we should go back and include. These are certainly things that we've asked Joe to come up with, based on his knowledge of all of our facilities and its needs, but that isn't to say that maybe we didn't miss something. So if you want to review those, in terms of timing, when we will decide all of this, we're probably not gonna, I know Lori wants to do one bond that would be this and for the transfer station needs altogether. There's some significant savings that will happen in that. And it seems to me now that based on our current timeline on the transfer station, some of that has been moved back when we'll know what that bond amount will be. So, Joe, I think Steve, we're looking at a GMP probably mid-May now or something like third week of May.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
For the gross maximum price on. So we're probably looking at, I think maybe the end of May as a timeline where we'll have a pretty good idea on the dollars that we're gonna have to bond for the transfer station. And it'll give us time to vet these things out a little bit more, if there's questions that you may have on some of them, and, or if you think there's something else that we've neglected to include, this is the time where we should be reviewing that. Based on, and of course, all of these items here, the one thing, Lori was looking at probably a 10-year bond for this portion. A 10-year bond on this one and probably a 20 or something on the transfer station, because that's a little higher dollar amount. Even though they're still incorporated into one bond, you can split the timing up of that. So, so we, some of these things that might be in our interest to do sooner rather than later, I guess, with.
Yep.
There's a couple of issues that we always are concerned about is availability. And, we used to think, okay, well, boy, we're really in luck now with the low interest rates, but some of that I think now is being eaten up by the cost of product. It's really skyrocketing. And so we need to pay attention to all of those things so that we get the best bang for the buck. But I don't know if there's any questions of any of you commissioners on what you've seen here, presented here. Yeah, we'll start with Commissioner Cayley.
So with this detox plan being in the priority 1 column, what happens then if we decide that detox needs to be somewhere else? And how does that work? How does that fit in here?
Well, so
On the list somewhere else or the location somewhere else?
The location somewhere else, not on the list. I mean, I think we know that it's a problem.
We did not put any dollars in for that right now because going through this, we just think that we would still have to plan. There'd take us considerable planning on that. We think that that'd be at least probably 3 years out or something like that to do that and to try to put a big dollar amount in there and to bond for that this soon. And it's pretty hard to, and I think we are somewhat limited, Brian, maybe you can help, but we're somewhat limited in terms of once we do bond, you only have X amount of time before that you have to spend that money. I think it might be 2 years or something, but 2 or 3? Yeah, okay. And I do want to say that we are still not certain of the America Recovers money that's coming in. We haven't gotten what qualifies for that, and there's some potential that something in here could qualify for those funds, but we don't know yet. So, but one of the things that we will have to do is we will have to either amend our current capital improvement plan or adopt a new one in order to bond for this, because the bond requires a capital improvement plan. So we will work with a bonding agency on that appropriate resolution. Steve, do you have something you want to add? Okay, you looked, okay, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ebinger.
Just to kind of bring the newbies up to speed, I am unclear. I know that primarily the court remodel is going to be the county's responsibility. Is there any state funding that can be contributed to that?
The real short answer is no.
I think
It's not necessarily one that we like, but it's, right.
if you talk to, I mean, you look at court administration and the fact that, you know, as they become a state entity, but state dollars don't get dedicated to them for improvements other than usually technology. So they get some technology dollars to improve things, but baseline improvements or the idea of the courtroom itself, they consider that the county's responsibility. And so they don't designate dollars against it. And so we've had those discussions with court administration as well. They would sure like to have some dollars if they could, but they don't. And so when I go back to it and we talk about looking at, you know, the room and everything else, I mean, I don't think we want to just put a couple of folding tables and folding chairs in there, but we also don't need to do the Taj Mahal. We just need to figure out what's the right balance to make a appropriately reasonable, nice courtroom that can be utilized and still allow for use, but not spend, you know, exorbitant amounts of money. So they won't come from the state.
I agree that's going to be a priority. I mean, we need more space for the courts. That's evident, so I'm not questioning that. I just wonder if they want to pony up some of the cost, and it doesn't sound like it.
Okay, I do know from a timing standpoint, I believe Frank, I think our committee meeting is tomorrow again, building committee?
10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yep.
Tomorrow morning, and, you know, so if you want to review this anymore, if you have questions, or if you find something, you can maybe send that through Steve or Joe, and we can incorporate that into our discussion and dialogue moving forward for a plan, but we thought it was important to bring forward these things, and the other thing too, based on that 10-year bond, one of the things that we've determined that we won't put anything in here that would have a shorter life than the period that we would bond for. So in other words, we're not gonna put something in here that's got a 5-year life and we're gonna pay for it over 10 years. That wouldn't make sense. So all of these things are at least a 10-year life or longer. So, Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question more in regards to naming instead of projects. I've noticed a couple times in some minutes on different committees that this facility is being called the Justice Center. And we've, you know, in conversation said that now this will be able to become a Justice Center. Do we have a timeline? Are we going to name it the Clay County Courthouse and Justice Center? Are we going to just leave it the Clay County Courthouse? My concern is that if we're starting to see it in minutes and it's not really an official named building, that becomes problematic.
Well, I think, yeah, definitely a topic at the building committee to add on to the agenda to really discuss this.
And I think certainly it makes sense. We've talked, I mean, Commissioner Whalen for years talked about the hope that this would become a justice center, but I think we need to be deliberate in making sure that we do it correctly.
Good point.
Good point. All right, we will. Look at that. Frank, do you have anything to add? Or no? Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a presentation from a pledge resolution from John Shockley. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
And this is in regards to a long-term maintenance. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a couple things going on. I have a
Okay.
couple handouts for the. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's John Shockley, and here's the. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. My name's John Shockley. For the new members of the County Commission, I serve as bond counsel and general counsel for the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. What is before the County Commission is a pledge resolution. And so I have a very brief presentation. My apologies for not including it in the packet. but just 2 pages, because I know time is very limited. Clay County is one of the 5 member entities to the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. When we negotiated out the joint powers agreement in 2016, Clay County and the city of Moorhead did not have any obligation for the capital costs of the project other than to ask the state of Minnesota to provide funds. We did have an obligation to provide operations and maintenance funding, but it was capped at 2% of the total operations and maintenance of the project. That's currently projected, depending upon where the bids come in and the final operations and maintenance costs, could be a total, the 2% would equal a total of $60,000 to $200,000 per year. And that 2%, we never put a sharper point on that because we knew at some point in the future, Clay County and Moorhead would have to figure out how do we allocate that 2% between Clay County and Moorhead. The pledge resolution doesn't allocate that because we thought it would be more appropriate once we know the cost for Clay County and Moorhead to figure out what that allocation should be, what a percentage should be of that 2%, whether the county's 40% and the city's 60% or it's 50-50. We sort of kicked that count down the road till we knew more about it. And that fee could be either generated by a mill levy or stormwater maintenance fees, things like that. Moorhead currently has in place a stormwater maintenance fee. That's how they're intending to pay their proportion of that 2%. And they kind of already have it built into the fee structure. It's actually a little bit cheaper than if the city were to have to enlarge its infrastructure and maintain that. So it's a good deal for the city. Getting to the summary of the pledge resolution itself, the pledge resolution has a couple of purposes. We're getting ready to issue significant debt by the diversion authority that consists of a WIFIA loan. That's in the amount of about $569 million. We're also issuing about $81 million of SRF loans, about another $150 million of refunding improvement bonds, and then on top of that, we're entering into a P3 transaction. And so because of the scale of the project, we wanted to sort of make sure that we left no stone unturned, and we wanted to make sure that all the member entities were aware of what was going on with the financing and authorize that. That debt is not a debt of Clay County, it's not a debt of any of the member entities, but still we wanted, just so that there was any absence of doubt that the authority could go ahead and issue the bonds, we wanted to make sure that the member entities authorized that. The pledge resolution also authorizes that 2% Minnesota share, but once again, it doesn't say who's gonna pay for it, and instead it says, 24 months prior to project substantial completion, Clay County and Moorhead are gonna figure out how to divide up that 2%. It also authorizes the Bank of North Dakota to serve as trustee. So under the transaction, we have a trustee that actually makes all the debt service payments. So as the sales tax revenues come in to Cass County and Fargo, they transfer them to a revenue fund that's held by the trustee, and the trustee makes sure all the debt service is paid. Whatever's left over at the end of all those payments gets put back to the diversion authority. In a very large transaction, it's very common to use a trustee. It's not that people don't trust anybody, it's just that having that independent third party when you're dealing with that much debt to make those payments gives everybody more comfort, whether it's EPA, WIFIA, or private bondholders, or the P3 developer. It acknowledges that under the master indenture trust and the pledge resolutions that you have all the bondholders and the P3 developers are what we call third-party beneficiaries, which means that the diversion authority's got to follow through on its obligations. Everybody's got to follow through on its obligations to make sure the debt service is paid. The obligations of the county regarding the pledge resolution specifically to the operations and maintenance would stay in place until all the debt was paid on the project, which is projected to be about 2061. The sales taxes in Cass County and Fargo extend out to 2083. The reason that we were able to shorten that debt repayment was through the WIFIA loan. which reduced the overall cost of capital from a average market of maybe 2 to 3%, maybe 4% for long-term obligation, down to about 1.5%. And then there's many different features of the WIFI loan. I'm happy to answer those questions. I also did, if you're interested, it's this, it shouldn't say confidential anymore because it was just approved by all the parties. But it just briefly provides, for those of you who are really interested in financing, how the flow of funds through the indenture of trust works, both during the, what we call the construction period, prior to the construction period net revenue sunset date, and then after. You may ask, what does that mean? That period is set to end either at the project substantial completion or December 31st of 2031. So that's the date that a light switch flips, so to speak, and we go from construction to debt repayment. And so currently, we're projecting that the diversion channel will be completed in 2028. Comprehensive project, the southern embankment, should be completed about that same time. And so we wanted to give ourselves an additional layer of time, just in case things happen, that we needed an extra 2 years to complete it.
John, can I, so on the project, the P3 portion of the project, does that have the operations and maintenance built into that for 30 years?
Great question. It does. So when we get our financial bids in, we'll get two components of that bid. First will be a capital component, and then an operations and maintenance component. And that operations and maintenance component is for 30 years. And so you'll know within a month, we'll know pretty close what our operations and maintenance costs long-term are going to be.
On the P3 portion?
Correct. And we do have pretty good estimates on the southern embankment and comprehensive project, just because the designs are sort of maturing on that. Typically with core projects, they're built to be very redundant and not have a lot of maintenance over a long period of time. And so for the southern embankment, it's likely to be mowing, maybe repairing some slumping, maybe, fixing an electrical box on the gates, things like that. There'll be some maintenance. Every year, somebody's got to go out and make sure the gates go up and down and work and do the normal maintenance. But we're not expecting a large amount of maintenance. The other component of the maintenance is the crop insurance that's provided to the producers for summer events and prevent plant. We have pretty good estimates of what that will be. Surprisingly, the premium is really reasonable. So, and we're kind of working up that, and we wanted to present, once we have the P3 costs for operations and maintenance, have a discussion about those longer-term operations and maintenance costs for the entire project.
And, I'm going to ask a few questions for new commissioners or whatever, so like now even within the P3 portion, there's several bridges that are going to be constructed. Do those bridges end up falling under the operations and maintenance of the diversion authority, or are they turned over to another entity for that purpose?
So there will be 14 bridges that cross the diversion channel. There's also a bridge on the I-29 roadways. On the channel, during the P3 contract term, all of the maintenance will be performed by the P3 contractor. They're also required during the term of the agreement to fund what's called a handback account, so that when we get the bridges back, we don't all of a sudden have 14 bridges that need maintenance that we can't afford, so they fund this handback account, and then we take over that handback account. It's sort of like building in a capital improvement plan. Those will be maintained by the diversion authority. Likely after the P3 is over in 30 years, I suspect that they'll ask the county, Cass County, to maintain them, and there'll be some type of an agreement between the diversion authority and Cass County. That's sort of another kick the can down the road, what'll happen in 30 years. But
And then my other question is, in terms of the total operations and maintenance budgets that they're going to be done annually, and I'm assuming then that is the Diversion Authority Board that establishes that budget,
Correct.
which includes members of Minnesota on that.
Correct.
Is that one of the items that requires a Minnesota vote?
So the overall operations and maintenance plan would require a Minnesota vote.
Okay, maybe just so that our board understands that, because there's certain things that they have to have a yes vote from a Minnesota entity for it to pass, correct?
And so just off the top of my head, the overall operations of the project, so when the gates get operated, when they close, when they don't, that has to be approved by at least one vote for the Minnesota side. And then the long-term operations and maintenance plan, so it's not just operations, it's maintenance, also requires a Minnesota vote. The annual budgets probably don't, but you wouldn't have an annual budget that would go against the operations and maintenance plan. I mean, at a certain point, it'll just become, how much does it cost to maintain the bridges? How much does it cost to mow the lawn or mow the grass on the southern embankment?
And you said that number could range from 60,000 to 200,000. That's anticipated annual. The 2% could range in that area.
Yeah.
I know in my conversations with Dr. Zimmerman, I think he was anticipating and maybe a $10 or less per household in Moorhead. I don't know if there's been new calculations done.
I don't even think it was that much when we originally had discussions about.
Not per month, per year.
Yeah, per year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
just wanted to clarify that wasn't.
Just
per month.
so the board has an idea, when that is spread out, it's not very much
Yeah, I think he was,
for permanent flood
Flat fee or
protection.
based on assessed?
no, they collect it through their stormwater fee, so each month, every property that has a utility bill gets a stormwater maintenance fee. And I think there's already sufficient, so like all the levies within the city of Moorhead, that's how their maintenance is funded already. And so, even if you took on 170,000 in Moorhead, it was like $1.20 a month or something for the average utility bill. It was not material.
And I think that makes sense in the residential areas. My major concern is the potential for significant burden on farmland.
Yeah, and Commissioner
Obviously.
Mojo, I agree, and so when it comes to the city and the county having discussion about how we break up that 2%, it only seems to me the best way to do it is to look at the benefited area and do some calculations that way. I think we should have that dialogue sooner rather than later, John, in terms of, and I don't know, probably a good place to start was maybe with our MCC JPA board to have that as an agenda item to start that dialogue so that there's no surprises down the road in terms of, and I think we need to maybe find out, obviously, everybody in Clay County will benefit in one way or another from this in terms of had there been a devastating flood, but when it boils right down to who has water on it, who doesn't, I think that's kind of the key issue here in terms of benefit.
Yeah, and I had, when I drafted the pledge resolution, I'd kind of assumed that those discussions would probably start, later this year after we had some better numbers on operations and maintenance. And so that's why in the pledge resolution, we leave it open how that'll be divided up between the county and the city. And we didn't really presume because we didn't know what share the county would take on, didn't know how exactly you wanted it calculated, and just sort of left that to be decided later.
I interrupted, I'm sorry.
Uh,
Were you getting close to finishing?
Yeah, I don't have anything else. I can answer any questions you have about the resolution.
So you need each entity's resolution as part of the whole WIFIA? In order to get the WIFIA loan, they want these resolutions in place, is that correct?
Well, so a couple things happen with, the WIFIA depends upon bond counsel, myself, to write an opinion that everything is, all the boxes are checked. While we could probably potentially not have a pledge resolution, my concern is that I don't want a member entity saying in 2 years, hey, I didn't realize that the diversion authority was gonna be obligated for, close to $1 billion. Because it just frankly, the size of the transaction, I want to make sure that all the member entities say, yes, go ahead and enter into the debt. I mean, at the Cass County and Fargo's pledge resolutions are critical to the transaction because they bring all of the revenue source for the capital repayment. But even Moorhead and Clay County, having that consent to go ahead and issue that debt, I think is really critical just because of the size of it. And it's one of those times which it's belt and suspenders the whole way through the transaction.
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion is that 2% based on the numbers that we're talking about here. Even in a moderate flood between the city of Moorhead and Clay County, we can be spending far more than $60,000 to $200,000 in a year, and it seems they happen more often than not. So, I certainly think we should be supporting this, and we kind of do it prematurely, not having an agreement with the city, but I think we can work that out. But other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Ebinger.
Just a couple of things, having looked at this, and Mr. Shockley, you were instrumental in this, but the WIFIA loan is critical of the whole project. The rate is really good, and it's helping answer a lot of questions. We're there and funding this. And the other, having worked for the city during 2006, I can assure you, there and the constituents I represent, and the city itself are we've got a lot of skin in this game. And I think that's plenty motivation to be comfortable that an agreement can be worked out. So I agree, the potential losses and even the cost of responding to a flood is greater than any encumbrance we can get on this maintenance. So I strongly recommend we go with this.
John, do you have a timeline when we would have to make this decision?
Yeah, we would like to see the pledge resolution either approved at your last meeting this month or the first meeting in May. Because we're looking to have the diversion authority approve the master indenture of trust on May 13th.
Right, well, maybe what I would suggest is this is a presentation that some of these we're hearing for the first time, and if we can allow the board members to take a week, and if there's questions, or if you have questions now you want to ask, but I don't think we need to rush and do this today, but I think if we look at, like I said, either the last week of April or the first week in May, that would be good for you to have that done by then. Okay.
And I did also want to take an opportunity to remind the county commission that as part of the project, we are going to be working with the city of Georgetown for their flood protection. And then there's also work contemplated in Comstock. So there are, beyond just the city of Moorhead, there are other beneficial parties to the project that are outside of the city.
All right. Yeah, and do we have any questions now, or, yeah, Commissioner Mojo?
Thank you. Just in terms of transparency, John, I really struggle when we're not clear on the agenda item. Something of this magnitude, I would have hoped that it would have been a pledge resolution for the diversion authority commitment, just in terms of the public wanting to dial in. This wasn't in the agenda packet, so I had no idea what it was. I appreciate moving forward the collaboration in terms of having the local entities work on that operation and maintenance plan. I think that has been something that has been birthed out of the concerns of citizens. Really, you know, the part I struggle with, and I think maybe all of us struggle with, is what that 2% hypothetical amount would be. And, you know, I know that it's hard to plan for. I kind of hoped Lori would have been here just because it's such a big part of it, but I know that she does budget for our elections that don't happen every year, but that has kind of figured out a way to budget for that. And I think that will have to go into what the equation looks like for how we plan for that going forward. I just, and I know I said it before, I really do not want to see, there's been substantial and, substantial sacrifice by landowners in the affected area, and I appreciate the fact that we're talking about benefited area, because I would hate to not only cut them at the knees with the effects of the project, but also tax them for the operations and maintenance that will happen to make it right moving forward. And I think it needs to be said, and
I'll flat out say, I would never support taxing them anything for operations and maintenance. If they've been on the other side of the benefited area, that just wouldn't make sense for us to put that extra burden on them. And and going to that, I think, I know that you talked about the city having their monthly way of collecting that to their benefit area within the city. And I don't think we should ignore the experiences of the watershed in being able to create an area that could do the areas that are outside of the city that would be benefited, and come up with an annual operations thing there. They've got good experience in that regard, and I would certainly propose that probably to the MCC-JPA and the city of Moorhead, that we should look at that as some experience in going forward and how to collect those funds. So we have some good options there. I don't think Lori's going to be really interested in it, and we've never done a special assessment at the county level. And I guess I'd just soon we don't get into that habit, but.
Yeah, and I guess I just, so the capital portion, I think, just for transparency, Clay County is not being asked, nor is Moorhead being asked for any of the capital contributions to the project. That's, the lion's share of the project is the capital component. On the maintenance side, it's 2% of the total maintenance, and the maintenance would not start until likely 2028. So you have nearly 6 years to kind of figure out how to allocate it between the city and the county. And the purpose of the resolution is just to acknowledge that 2%, that the Minnesota entities will have to come up with 2% somehow, and then authorize the authority to go forward with the debt issuance.
Okay, thank you. Steve, I think for the purpose of acting on this, if we want to put it on for next week or that first week in May, and I do agree with Commissioner Mojo that we should make it clear that this would be a Clay County pledge for maintenance on the diversion project. Just put it right on the agenda so that it's clear to everybody who might want to come and speak to it or have concerns.
And in going to that transparency, the one thing that I've heard from people who maybe aren't as knowledgeable about the project, they keep asking about who's going to pay for the project. I think it's really critical to remind everybody that Clay County is not being asked to pay for the capital component of the project.
That's correct. No entity in Clay County is being asked to pay for the capital project.
Correct.
There is a request of $80-some million, I believe it is, from the state of Minnesota for that share. All right, do we have anything else, any other questions? And if you have questions between now and when this is on again, you can feel, John, can they contact you for any questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, John. Steve, are you next? Oh, no, excuse me. We have our renewal for the STS contract. I didn't, we better not leave them out.
Morning, Mr.
Canal,
Chair.
good morning.
Commissioners,
Morning, Justin.
I am here to request the board to approve the fiscal year 22 and 23 STS contract. There is a slight increase due to salary and fringe as well as some other expenses. So the overall increase for fiscal year 22 would be a 3.38% increase. And then fiscal year 23, it would be a 3.40% increase. I would note that the county does contribute 75% of the cost and the state contributes 25% of the cost for the program overall. And I think there's some things that the state offers as in-kind, and that would include training, IT stuff, fuel, some of the equipment, some of the expenses that are also included in the expenses would be like for the safety of the crew members, depending on the project that they're doing. The STS crew leader will go and get safety gloves or rain gear or things like that for the crew members to make sure that safety is met for them. And so I think that the contract was presented to you guys, and there needed to be a county representative for that.
You know, the budget that you referred to, because the state STS, they do work outside of Clay County too, correct?
So Clay County's STS program does not do any work outside of Clay
Oh,
County.
okay, so this,
It's all within Clay County, and I think they've done some state projects. They've done some lake accesses in the past. That's really been reduced. I can, for the most part, it's been county related. I think that
thought
was-
their crews sometimes went outside of Clay County, but.
No, I think, yes, there's been a time or two when there's been a storm in a neighboring location. And so they've gone, I'm trying to think of where they went the most recent time, but they did go do storm cleanup. It might have been in the Becker County area. Yep, and I think some of those details were offered when we presented 2 weeks ago with what the percentage was for the state, county,
I guess
nonprofit.
I don't mind the fact that in a disaster situation that
Right,
we've had others help us too, so I guess
Yep.
I was just,
Highlighting
I didn't know if it was a routine, operation where they would go to other counties.
sure. No, not routine, just in a crisis situation where another
Okay.
community reaches out.
Okay. And so these contracts, what's the time period from them?
It covers the fiscal year 22 to 23, or fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23.
Okay. And so we have a little bit of time here, all right? When do you need to have these?
So fiscal year 22 would start July 1st, and
Okay.
so they are looking for the contract as soon as possible.
Okay. Okay.
And then also on today's agenda is requesting that the budget item be moved from the correctional center budget over to the probation department budget.
Is that your doing?
It was just a request that Julie and I had both made. The program isn't really supervised by the jail. It's not a jail function. The individual's not an employee of ours, so our request would just to move the line item money from our budget into Janelle's budget. If the
Sure.
board wishes to not do that,
That makes sense. Yeah.
it's nothing that we would oppose if it stays in our budget.
Well, this is one of those deals where the contract does not run parallel with our annual. Typically, we're more inclined to wait until we go through the whole budget process, but we're gonna just be starting our budget process by the time you need to have your contract renewed, so it does create a little bit of a,
Well, I think in essence of this STS program, I think one time, I don't know, a few years back, we made a motion that all of a sudden the STS program was gone.
yeah,
I
right?
think we should continue this STS program.
Yeah.
My question is just, I mean, there's a salary increase in this and stuff like that. At what point that we weren't involved in any of that salary increase? I mean, you're just saying there's a salary increase here, this is what you owe now for the STS program. I mean, I don't know if we should have been involved in that or not, but I definitely wouldn't make a motion that we continue this program.
And I can
No,
offer.
hold on, once we have a motion, I got it.
I'll second to continue
All
conversation.
right, motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Kaylee, now you can.
I apologize.
That's okay.
I can offer, I think historically, there were no increases to salary, and so the program is recognizing that they need to catch up with that because the staff has had step increases. And so that's why we see some increases with the salary range.
Okay.
I would also offer that our agency and our department do see it as a function of the correctional center, and so we really rely on them to see this as a resource and a program that they can hopefully make some of the individuals that are in custody available for the program. We do have a 10-passenger van available in Clay County, and as we know, the more individuals that are on crew, the faster the crew can complete projects and move on to another crew. Outside of COVID-19, I know our crews have been very limited, but hopefully when the community gets to a healthier state, we can increase our crew size substantially with the expansion of the correctional center.
Well, if I may, Mr.
yes.
I think that's an important piece. I think that maybe, Justin, it might be helpful for you to tell the newer commissioners the other crew that's available for things like that. I think where this board stands has been quite supportive of both, to allow them to get back into the community, to pay off some of those fines, but also to help to improve the community that they're a part of. And, it is an investment to have two separate crews, but I have grown up in this county seeing those crews doing projects, and I think that it's really important to continue it going forward.
Okay, so this motion is to approve I'm sorry.
Could just highlight the
Oh,
other crew.
yeah,
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 so-
I'm sorry, yes.
We do have two work crews. One is the STS crew, which is supervised by the Department of Corrections. It's a state employee. Those individuals that go out are typically sentenced individuals. They're sentenced locally. They have a fine that they have to pay off with the court system. So they get paid an hourly rate. They don't actually receive money, but the jail tracks their hours. They go out with the STS crew leader, work those fines off. We report it to the courts. The other crew that we run is a work detail crew. That is run by the county, fully funded by the county. He is a corrections officer employee, the crew leader of that. So those individuals aren't typically sentenced individuals. They are minimum security offenders. Some of them are sentenced. If we know they're gonna be sentenced to local time, what they receive in lieu of paying off fines is for every 10 days they serve on that crew, they receive a day off their sentence. So it's really a tricky situation. Over the years, I know Janelle has mentioned that the crews have decreased in numbers, and that really has been a trend because we're just not seeing those minimum security offenders that qualify for these programs in the jail. COVID has drastically decreased that in itself, just because of there's not as many minimum security offenders inside the facility, let alone we're just not running the programs right now.
Very good. So, Commissioner Gross, did your motion include the STS contract and moving moving it from the jail budget to the probation?
Yes.
Okay, is that met with your second? Okay. Just want to make sure that we have that for the record.
And just to clarify that the jail will continue to track the who's out, how many days they've been working, and you'll coordinate that together.
Yes, we still fully support the STS program. We're not opposed to having it, and still plan to use it.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried, and by the way, congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're well-deserved.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Steve. A request to provide 30-day notice to State of Minnesota for licensing.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As you're well aware, the last couple of weeks, the city of Moorhead and Clay County have been working together with an agreement to exchange and purchase some property located here within Clay County. One of the portions of that agreement has the county overtaking the area of our DMV site, our former DMV site, and the buildings that are on that property. Within those buildings, currently the state of Minnesota has their state testing that is operated out of there since 2002. We are currently under a lease agreement with them through June of 2023. But for our discussion today, a majority of our leases here at county with other vendors has the ability to terminate with a 30-day notice. Part of our discussions through this process as we worked with the city, Rory Johnson has had ongoing conversations with the state and notified of this potential. And so the request before you today for your consideration is to provide a 30-day notice to the state for termination of their lease. The expectation is that we would allow them to continue to utilize that space through the end of this year. Having moved our DMV this year, we know that it isn't something you can just close and open up somewhere else the following week. And so our goal is to provide them enough time to make the necessary adjustments that they need to move from that space. And with that, I'd yield for any questions.
Well, the first thing I would notice that the address is still, I think it was a couple of months ago, I talked about the address that is listed there, 1300 15th Street North. It's about 3 blocks from where the building's at, so I think we should probably correct that at one point. Other than that, I guess I would go along with it. We're gonna have to give them a notice and need a written notice and make a motion to approve it.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Kaylee. Further discussion? Yes, go ahead.
I think with the 30-day notice, I think it's also important for this board to articulate that we see the benefit to our citizens that service continues in Moorhead. We certainly, or Clay County anywhere, we certainly heard from residents when they were not taking appointments because of COVID, how much of a disservice it was, a nuisance. And so I think it's important to continue the dialogue to help foster their presence in the county elsewhere. I think it would really be challenging if they moved out of Clay County altogether.
Absolutely. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. Steve, you want to take this next item as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our agenda
Addition, I mean.
Our agenda addition today has to do, this past week, the Personnel Issues Committees conducted interviews for the new IT director. Tim Dent is going to be retiring after 32-plus years on May 7th. And so we were fortunate to have a number of qualified candidates for the interview process. when we got together after and reviewed the candidates, there was one candidate that really rose to the top with the experience and the interview that they had. And that person was Rory Schmitz. Rory's been working at Clay County for over 14 years, has a great deal of experience in the different projects that we've had over the last 5 to 7 years, but and also has a great deal of experience working with all of our different departments. And so I have Rory here today, and so we would be recommending that Rory be hired at grade 23, step 6. That falls within the policies of our county for a promotion. And so with that, I would yield for any questions.
Any questions?
No, I was on the interview board too, and I approved of this promotion, and I make a motion that we approve it.
I'll second the motion.
We have a motion by Commissioner Gross, second by Commissioner Mojo. Any further discussion? Commissioner Ebinger?
Question, do we need a backfill?
We will need a backfill on this, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Everett.
I can add that to it.
Okay, that's included in the motion in the second. Okay.
Congratulations.
We better vote first.
I made the motion, so I was second, so I think it's.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Introduce yourself to our new commissioners here.
Rory Schmitz, as Steve mentioned, been here 14 years as a systems administrator. Really looking forward to working with you commissioners and the rest of the management team at Clay County here. Very excited to get started.
Well, congratulations. All right, thank you. James, I saw you walk in here earlier. You're going to talk to us about some current legislation that might have some impacts on our juvenile center.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Last week, I had the WCRJC Advisory Board meeting, and in that meeting, I shared a couple pieces of legislation that are currently in the House and in the Senate right now that are essentially going through pretty quickly without, I think, proper information out there that people are making decisions on. Primarily, I'm going to be talking just today, providing information for you about the 2 bills that I think could have problematic things for our program. And I'm just speaking from a facility standpoint, not from social services or law enforcement or anything like that, just from a facility standpoint. These bills do affect social services and law enforcement also, but that's up to them to, well, I'm just talking about from a facility standpoint. The first bill, I guess I want to discuss a little bit is House File 947. House File 947 on the surface seems like a great bill, the correct thing to do. However, a lot of the testimony that's given and a lot of the information that was given to the legislatures, none of this information was requested of juvenile centers, facilities, anywhere in the state. So basically, some of the bills, the proposed bills is the one that will cause the most problems in juvenile centers is the elimination of what's called disciplinary room time, okay? Disciplinary room time is not solitary confinement, it's not isolation, it's not the hole, it's nothing like that. Disciplinary room time is if somebody does something serious, like an assault, like threatening to, I could bring a whole bunch of DRT sheets that would make most people blush with the types of things, the threats that are made, et cetera. Those would file under disciplinary room time. If you remove disciplinary room time and you say all these youth have to remain at all times in the pod, in the general area, now you have a situation where you have, say, 9 kids or 10 kids in a pod or 8 kids in a pod, and you have the one kid that's threatening, saying, I'm gonna do all sorts of different things, and what's that doing is it's causing a traumatic chaos environment for the other 9 kids. So we have to have a way to consequence and to remove that so the other 9 kids can continue on and accept our programming and go through our programming as intended. 947 doesn't worry about the 9 kids. In fact, it just kind of worries about the one individual. And you'll often hear things, the studies being misrepresented, such as isolation studies. Isolation has impacts on mental health, trauma. All those studies are true, but we're not doing isolation, we're not doing seclusion. They're trying to equate the two. And the way to drive it home is, I really look at it that it's not just me, it's not just the professionals that work in this field that understand that this proposed bill is very dangerous to centers. It's going to cause a lot of problems. It's going to cause a lot of trauma, chaos, chaotic environments. And one thing I did when I first heard about the bill, which wasn't that long ago, was sent out a thing for our residents to fill out. So it was graded on a Likert scale, 1 through 7. And basically I asked, I don't know if you guys have this sheet in front of you, you do, some of you do. Basically I took a sample of our youth, and basically I asked them a ton of different questions in there, but the one I was screening was to see if HF 947, what their perception, what the youth's perception that are in that juvenile center that are currently in secure detention, what's their perception of if this HF 947 would pass? And my perception and their perception are totally different. So that's why, let's ask the youth. The question was, would you feel safer in a facility if residents were never placed on DRT? That is what HF 947 proposes. A huge majority of the youth said not safer at all, in fact, not safe at all. So that's quite important. So it's not just us, it's the youth that are saying, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Also, we do surveys at the end of all of our long-term residence placements, and I have data and all that to show that the number of youth that we have that receive this as a consequence see it as appropriate, given their certain behaviors that they exhibited. Basically, this is just coming out of left field, and facilities are starting to talk. The Juvenile Center belongs to a group called MNJDA, and it's a group of all the juvenile centers in the state of Minnesota. Well, not all of them, but the major ones. And this is causing quite a stir for all the juvenile centers in the state. MNJDA has reached out to the legislature, wondering why they haven't been involved. Nobody's talked to anybody yet about this, or how we could. We're not opposed. Nobody's opposed to doing anything that's going to benefit the kids. Nobody's ever opposed to that. But how is it going to happen? How is it safely going to happen? So that's the HF 947 one. Another part of HF House File 947 is the delinquency age. It proposes that nobody can be delinquent under the age of 13. So 13 and above can be placed in secure, and under 13 can't. Just so this board knows that youth being placed in secure detention under the age of 13 is extremely rare. It's extremely rare. I do have some data somewhere here. In 2020, youth under the age of 13 made up 1.5% of our population. Of that 1.5, 1.3% were ordered by a judge. So that was after due process hearing, that was after everything like that. So basically in 2020, 0.2% of our population was made up by a law enforcement officer arresting a youth in probable cause for a detainable offense. Usually it's assault. And so that's 0.2%. That 0.2% is basically youth that are like 12 years old that are in a non-secure program such as ours that are assaulting other residents in that program. So that youth can't remain in that program. We run a non-secure program. I can't in good intention keep and recommend that we keep youth that assault other 12-year-olds, other kids in that program. I would have to request that the county, social services in this point, because it's a social services problem, find a better alternative for that youth, because that youth would be continually to assault other youth. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. James, the Senate file sibling to that is 951, correct?
I'm not 100% sure of.
So, just looking it up as you've been speaking, the Senate file is a 951. The three senators that are sponsors on that bill are senators from the Twin Cities Metro only, so I think it's important to hear that. First, I want to say, you have made the facility that you work at successful because of the passion that you have for this people that are in it. And I've been in there, I've seen you treat them with humility. You treat them as citizens who have made incorrect choices, but you want nothing but the best for them. And I think the part of what's frustrating for this, especially to see that Moorhead's Representative Keeler has signed on as a sponsor to that bill, is that this is a facility in northwest Minnesota that has really been looked to in the Midwest for a facility that really tries to treat people holistically. That's something that we were deliberate about with our correctional facility to make sure that there were treatment options available that could help to allow these people a better life going forward. Without this facility in Moorhead, their children would not be able to attend the school district in which that they reside. We've made sure that the Moorhead School District provides academics so that kids do not get stunted, that they're able to keep up with schoolwork. We've also ensured that families have the opportunity to visit their children locally. Without this, it would really be a nuisance for families that would have to travel to great lengths to visit these kids. I think the other piece is, unfortunately, as we heard with our sentence to serve stats, the amount of people that have minor offenses, unfortunately, is dwindling. And the severity in cases that you've experienced at the juvenile center has increased. And I think the success rates coming out of it have not decreased, so that's important to know. But we as a board have heard horrific stories of staff members that have been assaulted. And these are young people committing assaults. But the problem is, without your facility, these kids would have to be in a far more harsh environment. And I certainly feel that it's our duty to reach out, not only us as a board, but the West Central Juvenile Board, to reach out to those co-sponsors on the bill, to let them know that we are not sticking a kid in a room and forgetting about them. We are doing all we can to help rehabilitate a child that oftentimes has a court order. So I don't know if you need us to reach out to those co-sponsors on those two bills, but certainly I think this board supports what you're doing over there.
Commissioner Mojo, you raise a really good point, and we had extensive dialogue on this last Thursday morning at our regional juvenile meeting. And after your presentation, James, the board did not hesitate, and they passed a resolution immediately, unanimous resolution to contact all the legislatures from all of the member counties outside of Cass County, being in North Dakota, in support of holding back on these files until your regional centers have an opportunity to go and talk to them about what's going on and what this would do. Because I do agree, we were able to see some things in a private meeting that were very disturbing. And to suggest that the individuals, as Commissioner Mojo talked about, that are very hostile, would be allowed to stay in a population with those who are not, is not an appropriate way of handling things. So it was very, for just so the rest of this board knows, all member counties in Minnesota, after seeing and listening to your report, we fully support it. And I think that was why I had asked James to come here and present this today, in hopes that we would, as a Clay County board, would, just like the other counties are going to do with their local legislatures, send a message to them explaining what our concerns are on your behalf, and to ask, like you said, we're not opposed to legislation that's going to improve things for kids. But, maybe through the presentation, that might have happened with the authors, that they don't see the things that you're seeing, right? So I think it's important, and I certainly hope that we will, as a board, will send a message to our Senate and House representatives to, back this off a little bit until we can let them know about the concerns. So, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ebinger, you wanted to talk as well.
I appreciate this being brought forward. When I first came on the board, James gave me a tour of his facility, and I did 40 years as a police officer. Part of that was commanding a unit that handled violent juvenile crimes. Part of it, 12 years of it, was chief here, where your facility and your predecessor's facility was at our disposal. And I had peers across the river who so envied it that they made a major financial commitment so the kids in Cass County could be sent here and go to school and be supported and help walk them through the trauma and the violence that have been part of their lives. I have no doubt that this was well intended. But legislative bodies have got to learn to talk to the experts before they make decisions, to talk to people who do the work before they decide. There's secondary consequences on so much legislation that's coming out. People who mean well and want to address issues that they see, but as a result, they're causing similar or worse. In your facility and in most facilities, the primary job is protect people who are sentenced there or who are incarcerated there from each other. If we're doing our job on hiring and supervising, you don't need to protect these kids from the staff, and you do your job and you have a committed staff. You need to protect those kids and your staff from the outliers, the ones that come in who have such violent behavior that they can't respond any other way. And to not be able to isolate your other clients from a kid who's out of control is reprehensible. You'd be negligent to allow that to happen, and you're doing your job right now bringing it forward. And I strongly recommend we let our local legislators in particular know that they need to ask the right questions before they start legislating in areas where they lack expertise. This is not the first example I've seen out of the last couple sessions, and it won't be the last. But they need to ask the hard questions and figure things out before they start changing the ground rules. And I am grateful for you bringing this forward.
Well said, Commissioner Avery. And I want to talk for a minute about this individual that might be separated, and he or she would be separated for a violent act. And even though that has happened, explain what you're still going to do for that child.
Virtually everything. The youth in this example would be placed in disciplinary room time. And
They still receive an education?
yes. And it would depend on how much violence they predict. So like, they would still get their school. Their schooling would be done in their room though. The teachers would come to their room, staff come to their room. Their DRT is reviewed every 8 hours. Supervisor signs off every 8 hours to decide if that youth needs to remain on DRT or not, if they've made progress, if they've made amends, if they've apologized. So this youth, I actually don't know the details on it. I'm sure is done with his sanction, but I know the first 3 days of that, every chance he got when he was out, whether it be for physical exercise, making phone calls, or getting schoolwork, he was bragging about how he beat the staff up. So that causes issues for the other youth that are there trying to learn, thinking, maybe I'm gonna try that. So that's where we run into issues with this type of legislation. And to echo everything this board has been saying, we're not opposed to anything. We just would like to be part of the conversation. If you're going to make major changes in the programming, how can we safely do this and be part of that conversation and make it happen?
You had sent out a letter based on, you drafted a letter based on the actions of the West Central Board. We don't, in our packet, we don't have that letter, do we? I know Commissioner Ebinger, you've, as a member of the West Central, you saw it. I don't believe that the rest of our board has seen that. Could you, do you have enough copies to give to them? I think James did an excellent job in writing that letter, and it really kind of really talked about our concerns. And you know, Commissioner Mosier, you mentioned something, and Commissioner Ebbring, you mentioned something too about contacting our local legislatures. And I know that this letter, I think, was going to be copied to them. Was it Steve or James, right? But I still think it might be appropriate for us to maybe follow up with this based on Clay County's own support.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I would support us sending a letter almost verbatim to what this is. I think I would appreciate if it includes the Senate file that I also referenced as part of that, and then send it to the co-sponsors on that as well.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. We have a motion by Commissioner Mojo, second by Commissioner Ebinger. Discussion.
Did you mention that the Representative, is it Heather, is she a sponsor of this, or a co-sponsor of this?
Yes, she's a co-sponsor on the House file.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Just one question.
Yes.
Were you ever contacted by anybody, any of our local legislators?
Negative. The first contact, Mr. Chair, Commissioner, negative. The only time that I received, the first time I heard about this was from the superintendent from Bemidji, and she contacted me via phone, and I thought she was just joking with me at first. And then she sent me the actual House file, and so no, I haven't been contacted. Nobody in that MNJDA group has been contacted. So there's no juvenile centers has been contacted in reference to developing and passing these bills.
About juvenile centers.
Is there an organization that's pushing this, or is it just representatives?
Minnesota Department of Corrections.
Yeah, and I do want to point out too, and then I'll get to your comments, but part of our West Central meeting, Janelle Cheney is always there on behalf of probation too, and she was very surprised at some of the things that was going on and what was happening through the Department of Corrections. And she mentioned that she was going to try to talk to her superiors too, and trying to figure out what's going on there in hopes that there can be some modifications to this House bill.
I would recommend we send any correspondence we have, we CC to Paul Schnell, the Commissioner in the Department of Corrections, and I served on the Chiefs Board with him. He was formerly the police chief in a couple of cities. And he has a background in social services. I'm surprised that there's not been inclusion of input from folks like James to make this type of legislation.
Thank you.
Commissioner
I had a
Moser.
question for Commissioner Ebinger. As part of your AMC Public Safety Committee, has this been brought up? If so, I know that we have platforms that we support or not. Has there been conversation at that level?
Has not been brought up at this point, but like we had with the force issue on the legislation that's currently there, I will be contacting the AMC public safety person today and forwarding this information and expressing my concerns on that. That's one of the problems we've got with remote meetings, is these discussions don't take place and we don't inform each other. And I'll see what I can do about getting this on the radar.
Okay, thank you. And I think the reason I asked for that is typically Matt Hilgart will reach out for me if they're looking for folks to provide testimony on bills. And if this is gaining momentum in both the Senate and House, I certainly feel that, James, you can coordinate with Commissioner Ebinger if they're looking for testimony on how, I'm not saying we want it to not be part of any dialogue, but I think it's important that you hear what's happening at the ground level for these legislators. Thank you.
Okay, Brian, are you hearing anything about this through your county attorneys at all, or?
I think I'd only say, and I would just maybe add what Commissioner Ebinger was talking about. I was just watching, I think as the Dante Wright matters were happening, they had some representatives down there and they were talking about 16 different bills that they've, put forward. And so I feel like some of this, just like I've heard, in regard to the use of force, where legislators wanted to take action, and I put that in air quotes because they're taking action before maybe referring to the experts, and so they want to look like they've done something and done something right, and yet potentially they're making things worse. And so I don't think this is the only bill that's potentially problematic. I think there's a series of bills that, just like the problems that we're having with the use of force and dealing with repeatedly, now another one, but I think there will be another one and another one. I think a majority of these that might get pushed through in a matter of trying to show that they're taking action and pushing those to a forefront without really doing their due diligence or having them in committee, it will be problematic. And so we're already seeing those things and hearing about possible things in the future. So I think there's probably a good 16 bills that are probably out there.
That's encouraging. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carried. We are kind of running a little bit long, but I know you wanted to talk about another bill too, right? Or?
Yeah, just real quick, Senate File 898. Basically, the piece with that is coming from, I'm speaking on behalf of the regional board now. In Clay County, we do have some alternatives and different resources. This Senate File 898 calls for a risk assessment tool. The risk assessment tool is something that's been gaining momentum for 10, 15 years now. It's a JDI type of screen. That bill in and of itself was a bill that was before the last legislature. It got my attention. It didn't pass. So that's why I went with the Ohio Youth Screening Inventory. So our staff got trained on this Ohio Youth Screening Inventory last year. And one of those screening tools can be used as a springboard for this type of thing. The problem with it is that all law enforcement agencies, attorneys' offices, whatever in our regional have to agree to that type of what constitutes the screen. The problem with it is each county has different resources and different problems. And this particular bill, the way it's written, I don't know the details on it, but the way this particular bill is written, it doesn't even allow for an override, which most JDI tools, pretty much all of them do. But the way that this particular bill is written doesn't allow for an override, which is very dangerous. And it puts basically the pressure on the juvenile centers. Basically, I'll just read real quick. If a peace officer, probation, or parole officer who took the child into custody does not release the child provided in subdivision 1, the peace officer or probation or parole officer shall communicate with or deliver the child to a juvenile secure detention facility to determine if the child shall be released or detained. Basically, the bill is putting it on the juvenile center to decide if that youth should be detained for the night or to be released. And the problem with that is the juvenile centers, we don't have the information that law enforcement has when they made that arrest. Whatever it is, we don't know that information. The problem with objective screening instruments is there's subjective questions in them, such as, does the child have appropriate consequences at home? Does the child have appropriate guardianship at home? Those are subjective questions in an objective tool that just muddies the water. And when law enforcement shows up and they make an arrest, they do not do it. They detain youth out of a very least, they don't want to do it. But in some cases, they have no choice, whether it be they can't find a parent, the parent's intoxicated, the assault was on the parent or guardian in that household. So there's a whole slew of reasons why law enforcement would decide to detain the youth that night.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Monroe.
Thank you. I might also add that the Minnesota House File sister bill to this would be House File 922, and our local representative is also a co-sponsor on that.
Do we have any comments? Well, we had a resolution on the other one. I don't know where this one is going. I think it's putting quite a burden on a potential late shift in a, and Steve, you were involved in it too. Can you imagine somebody, a police department or a county sheriff bringing a child here at 1 o'clock in the morning and our staff having to try to determine whether or not they should be admitted? I agree with you. I don't think that I mean, it's one thing maybe during the course of a day when we have professionals there that also deal with programming could assist in that, but that isn't 24/7. And I think it's putting an unfair burden on somebody who doesn't have, like you said, the information that the arresting officer, if that's what you want to call it, has in terms of are they safe to be let go in the public? Are they would they give a full report to the juvenile center as they drop the kid off?
Right now, it's if it's a detainable offense, and the law enforcement officer has probable cause to arrest, law enforcement also has the discretion to release, and they do quite a bit, and kids commit all sorts of offenses that are detainable that law enforcement don't detain because there is an adult pro-social adult guidance figure that they can release them to, and that's what they do. There's, the evidence in that, I would say, is probably the fact that our youth that are in our facilities get very few visitors.
Maybe a question that I can ask to our former experienced law enforcement guy on our board here is do police and sheriff's officers, do they receive training in regards to when an arrest is made on a youth? And do they kind of have a process that they go through, whether they should be released or brought someplace?
Absolutely, and incarceration, an arrest and incarceration is last resort in most instances. And it's usually because the juvenile is either in a dangerous environment that you don't want to leave them in, and there's nowhere that you can find to take them. Or the juvenile is so out of control that they're a threat to other people, which, when you look at a juvenile offender, if they're a threat to other people, they're a threat to themselves, because they can escalate it to where they get more serious charges, where they can hurt somebody or get hurt. Without going too far afield here, I mean, one of the concerns is when the legislators decide that the judgment of facility staff or law enforcement officers is suspect, as a rule. When we start with the point of departure, that these people are making the decisions for the wrong reasons or lack the training and the ability to make decisions, we are on a fool's errand. And we are going to eliminate the expertise in the field and the experience in the field and the people that understand what the resources are. And that's my concern on both of these and some other legislation, as the county attorney indicated. We do need to speak up. I don't question the motives of the people that are writing these legislation, but we need to get them to slow down and ask the proper questions to the proper people to find out what's working and what isn't.
Well, so we've had action on House File 947, and I'm wondering if our board would be interested in maybe within that same letter then making some comments regarding the portions of House or Senate File 898 and its House File 922 companion, just with what our concerns are in regards to that. We should probably address them both in the same letter, I would think.
4 files.
Well, yeah, so we have, so the House file was 947, the companion was the Senate file 951, and then you presented to us, James, as Senate file 898, correct? And then Commissioner Mosher, you said the companion is House file 922. So I think we should probably address our concerns regarding the House and Senate file 922 and 898 as well. Does the board agree with that? Should we?
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to draft this letter? Steve? James, the two of you? James, you going to draft it?
I will.
On behalf of,
direction.
and then, addressing what, she wanted it to be kind of pretty much a carbon copy of this, but we'd have to add a paragraph explaining the other one. And maybe if you can write that, can you make a motion on that?
Yeah. I'll make that motion that you wordsmith. It's perfect.
Okay, and a second there?
I think the other piece is just to add, like I said before, at the end of it, we'd be open for conversation. And if you would like testimony, members of the staff or the county would be happy to help testify.
Absolutely, that's very good. And that they should, part of this whole, these files as it's being pushed forward is that they, before they make a final deal, that they reach out to our facilities to find out what these, maybe there can be some modifications made to their current form, so. Okay, yes, Commissioner Abbey.
Just to reach out, since I already shot my mouth off, but I think they would discover that if they came to your facility, they'd find out that it is being done right, and that the concerns that they have for these kids are being addressed. I think they'd find a fair degree of, they could proceed with confidence. If they want, they can look at other facilities and say you need to be more like what's in Clay County. But they need to ask you and other facility directors with similar success rates, what are you doing right? Because there are things being done right. You don't have to throw it out. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can find out what best practices are, and you can fund and enforce and legislate to bring everybody up. You don't have to burn the whole place down. So I think that's a message we need to get across.
All right, very good. Steve?
Mr. Chair, if we could also address, I think, the Department of Correction, what's probably most disappointing about this piece is the support from the Department of Corrections. The West Central Regional Juvenile Center, and I will say, I know most of the people that James works with across the state and association, they're running quality facilities. And I think the fact that this legislation has come forward with the support of the Department of Corrections, with the understanding that I know James and his staff bend over backwards to meet the expectations that's set by the Department of Corrections. And so to come out and to come from a different direction, I think is very disappointing, to throw that curveball when they have the opportunity on an annual basis or every other year. James and his staff are meeting every other year with the Department of Corrections from a licensing standpoint, because they have a history of doing the right things. And so I think that is probably, for me, one of the most disappointing parts of this.
So we have a motion and a second, and I guess what I'd like to see on that, if that letter, because that letter is going to be addressed based from the county board. So, I guess I wouldn't mind signing as the board chair that letter, and then maybe to have a signature from our administrator and from James on there, if that is okay. But we did have a motion and a second, so all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. And if we could, because time is of the essence, I'm wondering if, Steve, if maybe you on behalf of us could try to just at least send an email out to Senator Eakin and Representatives Marquardt and Keeler that we do have some concerns and a letter is forthcoming. I just think it would be good for them to know that today. In the event that there's still activity going on as we speak, I think it's important that they know that we have some concerns, and it'll be coming in a formal letter. All right. James, anything else?
No, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you,
You're
Commissioner.
doing great work over there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're only almost an hour behind here.
That's good stuff.
All right. Request for annual supply bids for highway.
Yep, thank you. Oh,
Good morning.
Morning.
The first item we have is approval of our annual supply bids. I think we kind of do it in two parts, possibly. I'm trying to remember how we did it in the past, but the first part, which would include the metal culverts, bituminous asphalt, and rental of construction equipment, is essentially a list of different contractors and vendors that we use throughout the year. It gives us flexibility depending on what part of the county we're working in. And for the most part, all the numbers have come in relatively close to last year, so we're not seeing a great increase in price, which is very nice. The second part of the yearly supply bids is actually more of a competitive bid, and that's for the gravel, maintenance gravel that we purchase and put on county roads only. There's 30 townships in Clay County, and we bid out each township separately. So there could be 30 different contractors or suppliers. Of course, there's not that many, but the way it works out is we typically have 2 or 3 or 4 that bid on these. This year, I think we had, was it 4 of them? 4. 2 of them are more versed to actually supplying and delivering and hauling the gravel for us. The other 2 are mainly on the list. I think if we need to purchase gravel, they do crush it, and we can pick it up in our own truck. So I guess to sum things up for the gravel bids, Strata Construction ended up with 5 different townships providing gravel. It's townships 3, 4, 9, 24, and 25. And then Turner Sand and Gravel, who's typically one of the bigger producers, does a lot of smaller work like this, does a lot of township work. He was low bidder on townships 1, 2, 5 through 8, 10 through 23, and 26 through 30.
Okay, and that's typically one of the, where we do that one separately, don't we?
Right.
Right. So I would entertain a motion to approve those.
So move.
bids. All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Gross,
Second.
second by Commissioner Ebinger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign, motion carried, and then we have all the others we can combine into one, right?
Right.
So, and you've listed those.
Yeah, corrugated metal culverts, furnishing bituminous asphalt, and rental of construction equipment.
And there you have a list, and it's based on, you might choose somebody based on where you're doing the work in the county, right?
Location, maybe
For our new
availability.
commissioners, that's kind of how that works. Or they,
Makes sense.
somebody in the northeast part of the county, they might choose somebody different than if it was in the southwest part of the county. All right, do we have a motion to approve those
So moved.
contracts? Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Ebinger.
Second.
Do we have a second? Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear. Second by Commissioner Cayley. Commissioner Gross, question.
Do we supply this metal culverts to townships yet?
Well, I
If
do
they were
work-
to put in an approach?
Right, I guess the short answer is yes. Yep. We make sure that it's okay with True North Steel, and they have almost always honored that to utilize so I think they sell it through the county, and then our auditor's office bills the township. They get a better price, and the culvert supplier is okay with doing it that way, so.
Okay, so
Yes.
we don't really give it to them, we
No.
sell it to them.
Right, yeah, they get our price based on the volume of culverts that we buy. I feel like we get a better price because we have a certain volume. Some counties, like Norman County, for instance, they actually buy and have a stockpile, and they've got an inventory of culverts. We sometimes have a very small inventory. If we put one in and something happens and we move things around, but I guess a lot of counties actually have quite a big inventory. We're lucky. The culverts are actually just right across the river, so we're able to get them on within 3 days, so the county doesn't have to have that inventory on hand.
Really quick.
Yes, Commissioner Mojo.
Yeah, in terms of new accesses, I know we talk a lot about that at the Planning Commission and making sure that the access management plan is followed with you. Are we making sure that folks that are putting new, do we have eyes on those new approaches to make sure if they need a culvert, there is a culvert or it's placed correctly?
Right, as part of that access permit, it's a $100 permit, and that requires 2 site visits, one initially where they survey it out, and then one finalizing to make sure it was built correctly and not too wide or too steep a slope, so that's very correct. And we size them, and if we have issues, we work with the watershed, and they have to get a watershed permit. If it's a replacement, I don't believe they need a permit, but if it's a new one, then they have to have a watershed permit.
Thank you.
All right, any further comments? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion carried, and we're going to go into your highway update.
Right, I was curious, am I the last department to do this? It seems like I am.
Today. There you are.
All right, I'll go through this as quick as I can.
Please.
Any questions, I guess, feel free to fire away. It is the same format that I did put together in 2017. I updated some things. The nice thing is it really gives a good comprehensive look at the highway department and some of the assets or buildings that we have. So if you want to jump to the next slide. Essentially, our highway department's made up of 3 areas. We got maintenance, engineering, and administration. We've got 23 full-time on the maintenance, and that is essentially motor grader operators and maintenance workers or truck drivers. We've also got sign shop, we've got the actual shop, and then maintenance foreman. Engineering, we've got 6 full-time engineering technicians. They design and construct the roadways for the county, and then administration would be an engineer, assistant engineer, and then 2 clerical staff up front. The next page is just our organizational chart. I've worked with our HR department a couple of different times on this, and I still think it could probably get reworked a little bit, but this is, so far, I guess things are working all right. It's a little bit plateaued type of a org chart, but I guess until we get time to get something different, that's kind of how things are. Next slide. In order to perform maintenance, we've got 11 districts, so that means there's a motor grader in 11 different areas of the county. They've got 125 miles each, which is actually probably twice what the level that they can actually perform good routine maintenance. I mean, that's a lot of miles. A motor grader blades anywhere from 3 to 5 miles an hour. In a good day, they can do maybe 10, 11, 12 miles per day. So it's really hard to get over 125 miles in a certain amount of time. I mean, there's probably, actually there's roads probably get bladed once or twice a month, which sounds ridiculous, but when you have that many miles, it just takes that long to get around. And of course, there's some miles you do have to do weekly. The ones that have, above 200 cars per day and upwards of 400 cars a day, those miles are going to have to be bladed much more frequently than others. Luckily, some of the other lower volume roadways, when they're bladed, they do stay in a decent shape longer. So that's kind of how that works. The 7 outlying shops that we have, we'll go through that. I got some pictures of those later. And then our department headquarters is in Moorhead, and I'll go through that in another slide as well. I've got a picture of a motor grader. It's significantly had to increase the price from 2017, but the ones that we were approved to purchase in January were $360,000, which is astronomical amount of money. We've got a picture of one of our most recent Freightliner trucks at about $232,000. Now that's fully equipped. That's with the snow equipment on there as well. So I think that adds another $25,000 for the wing and the front plow. Next picture is, and you'll see all these outlying shops, a lot of them are real similar. They must have been built about the same time. This one up in Georgetown can only handle the motor grader and a pickup truck. What we'd like to have is at least room for a truck and a motor grader. Georgetown wouldn't be quite as crucial because it does come out of the Moorhead shop, but there's another one here as we get to like Ulen, you'll be able to see. Felton is a little bit bigger. We can get a truck and a motor grader and a pickup truck in Felton, which is very, very nice. That shop is actually not in too bad a shape. The Ulen shop has got issues. The foundation is starting to settle and the whole building is getting a little kittywampus, but there is not room for the plow truck there, and that comes out of the Holly shop, which is quite a ways away. A lot of times the motor grader operators will opt to run the truck because they do have CDLs, and they can get around and they can cover a lot more ground. Like if there's just a light snowfall, they don't need the motor grader. So for this operator, he drives all the way to the landfill, jumps in the truck, drives back up and plows in around the Ulen area, and it's just a lot of time running around. I think Joe from Building Maintenance mentioned the Ulen shop today at the capital improvements part there, and what we'd like to do is maybe build just a little bit bigger shop here that would have 2 doors, one for each, one for the truck and one for the motor grader. The next shop is our Comstock shop. That as well is another one that's on our capital improvements list there. You can kind of see, I'm glad I took that picture years ago. You can see how crammed it is with just a motor grader and a pickup truck. It's pretty tight on there, and I think it would be some very, very nice improvement to have enough room to house a couple pieces of equipment. The plow truck for Comstock does come out of the Moorhead shop again, which isn't a huge hindrance, but it would be nice to have a little bit more room in these shops. The next one is our Glendon shop. That one there is a very nice facility. We just recently did some work on the tin on the building itself. The back corner there was I don't know if it just wore out. There was actually holes right through the bottom of the tin. So we removed a bunch of tin and got that all patched up. But you can see there's enough room for the plow truck, the motor grader, and a pickup truck. There's a little office in the back, and I guess I like this little shop. It's a nice little building. We haven't acquired any of these little shops since I've been here in the last 20 years. The Barnesville shop was built due to a fire that we had, I think back in 2011. It was one of the first style buildings that we built with. It's got 7 overhead doors, 7 different stalls with an office there on the, kind of on the south side of the building. I believe we got a septic tank. So that's part of the other issues with where you would locate shops, and what you have for infrastructure is a lot of them don't have water and sewer, and you have to have enough water pressure for sprinkler systems in these things, which is very problematic too. Next picture is our Holly shop. That one is built jointly with the solid waste department. It's a enormous structure. I think it's 90 feet wide, which is the absolute biggest width, I believe, that you can do on a post frame style building without having actual steel members inside. You can kind of see the red line there. So the landfill has the north side of the building. They got the 2 overhead doors. They run garbage and leachate back and forth from Perham into the city of Fargo. And then we've got on the next page there, you can kind of see what our middle section looks like. We have a lot of room there. It took us a little while to kind of get that thing fully occupied, but we've got enough equipment out there where it is pretty well full already, which is fantastic. We were able to get stuff from being stored outside and staged out there. The MnDOT got a new kind of like not a street sweeper, but they call it a tenant sweeper, and we bought their old one. It's a little drivable unit now, so, I mean, if you can see the size there, to have guys go around and push that with brooms, it took 3 or 4 guys about a half a day to do that. Now we've got a nice little sweeper out there, so it's another thing to note in that picture, right above that yellow truck, you can kind of see the overhead doors there and those 2 windows. There's an actual big mezzanine up above the offices that was built to handle additional storage, and that little overhead door can lift up, and with our forklift or pallet jack, we can put heavy items up there. So it's a little underutilized, but we've got room for growth if and when we need it for storage up above there. Our next picture is our Moorhead Joint Facility, which is, hopefully everybody knows where we're at, or I think everybody has been there. We moved in there in July of 2002, and it has been a fantastic venture. I know initially we were a little worried about cooperation and collaboration between the 3 entities, and it's been nothing but good. And in fact, later today, I believe there's going to be a temporary EOC possibly staged out of there. So there's going to be additional efforts, and which happens quite a bit. I know during the flooding, National Guard will stage out of there, and in the spring we have DNR that brings their boats out there, and we try to accommodate any additional needs that are out there. The next picture is our cold storage tent. This is one of the structures slated for replacement in 2023. This and the salt building were both built by a company that is no longer in business. There was potential issues with the structure. If you want to go to the next one, you can kind of see what's inside there for that truss framing there. The state has determined that our buildings weren't so closely related that they had to come down, but there was some of these structures that did fall down, and then I think that's kind of why that company went out of business. I'm doing everything I can to work with the state to replace as much of the existing infrastructure as we can. I believe all those trusses are going to go. The tents are almost 20 years old, that fabric, and it's due for replacement. But you know, there's concrete. You can see there's concrete walls there, and I just don't know if we can build something that will fit right on top of that. But we're doing everything we can to try to keep the cost down. The salt structure itself is an equal third ownership between the state, the city, and the county. And then the cold storage structure itself is 2/3 county, 1/3 MnDOT. So that's kind of how we'll be moving forward on those replacements. The next few pictures, I got some interesting flooding pictures, just another thing that we luckily didn't have to fight this year. This is that North Broadway bridge that we've been talking about recently that we had to close. You can see the enormous amount of trees that come up there, and the structural engineers have stated that when those trees are pushing up against that pier that's leaning, that's one of the most devastating things that's very, very hard on that bridge itself. So we're then forced to hire someone to come clean all those trees out of there. In fact, they need to be cleaned out right now today. There's some trees down there, but it's really tough to get down there. There's not a lot of room. But that's some of the things that we have to deal with. The next picture, that's up on the North Broadway roadway, County Road 1. That road has since been moved to the east, probably about 50 to 75 feet, and it was recently rebuilt and constructed with part of the flood mitigation up in the Oakport area. So I think that was maybe the final phase, I think, of that whole mitigation project up there. But it was nice. We worked with the watershed and the DNR on that, and part of the dike on the west side of Oakport then is our County Road 1, so we were able to get a good road build out of it. The next picture is County Road 26. It's just, just east of Cragness. The water shoots out of the Buffalo River, comes across those fields, dumps over our roadway, and it completely chewed our roadway up in 2009. Pretty devastating. And I think the last flood picture I have there is the one on the left side is County Road 36. That's the one that goes to the Georgetown Bridge over the Red River. You can see that's how the locals have to get in and out of their property is with that boat. And then trees and debris and different things blow up on the road, so our motor grader is scraping ice and moving debris. And then the road on the right is County Road 100, just south of Georgetown. Everything in the whole county makes its way to south of Georgetown and dumps into the Red River, and there's the entire section fills up and blows over the top of our road. And I think I've seen this same exact picture at least 3 different times since I've been here. Most recently, we had a landowner asking if he could add a culvert in this area, and when you see this picture, you realize that adding a culvert's not going to do much when you do get those type of velocities and amount of water. So, just got a few slides left. Just want to touch a little bit on our county road system itself. Our system is made up of two types of roads. We have state aid roadways and county roadways, and they're just basically set apart by how they're funded. State aid roadways are funded by gas taxes, tab fees, and now we got lease sales taxes. We've got sales on auto parts, and I'll get into some more of that later. But we've got 404 miles of state aid highways, and the state itself was divided out probably about 40 years ago. And so many miles were set aside for state aid funds, and some of the lower volume roadways were set aside as county roads. I don't exactly know how it all got developed back in the day, but we ended up with 404 miles of state aid roads. 272 miles are hard surface with asphalt or concrete, and 132 miles of them are gravel. Next slide on the county road system, which is funded pretty much entirely by local levy. We cannot use gas tax dollars on the county road system itself for reconstruction and paving and improvements. There's 337 miles of county roadways, of which almost all of them are gravel. You can see 321 of them are gravel, and 16 miles are hard surfaced. We also do bridge inspection and bridge construction. There's 335 bridges and culverts. If a culvert's over 10 feet in width, it's called a bridge in the eyes of the state. We also include the township structures, as we are the agency that oversees the ratings and deficiencies and on inspections, I guess, on the township structures themselves. We've always done that at no cost to them, and we work with them. They do have a separate pot of dollars, town bridge funds that come from gas taxes, and we help deliver that program for them. We also do maintenance on the township roads. You can see there's 748 miles of township roads that have full-time maintenance that are provided by the county. That's blading gravel and then plowing snow in the wintertime. Annual budget, you can kind of just a little snapshot there. I talked a little bit with Ann in the auditor's office about why that fluctuates so much, and a lot of it has to do with our construction program. So if we've got a real big construction program, there's not any additional levy dollars, it just shows more state dollars. Or if we were to bond for $10 million and spend $5 million of it in one individual year, that would bump up by that $5 million. But somewhere between $14 and $15 million is our budget. Our levy is about $2.5 to $3.5 million. State aid allotment. Now, this is the dollars that come from the gas taxes specifically for construction only, not maintenance. You can see we were pretty constant between $2.5 and $3.2 million for a while. Then in 18, we made a big jump there, and that's when we started getting auto parts sales tax dollars. And that's why I'm big advocate for that. I think that really helped. That gave us a pretty big chunk of money, and I know there's talk of switching things around and maybe that going back to the general fund. And I guess I'm hoping that it stays where it is, at least for a while, until some changes. I'd like to see our funding stay at that $3.9 million for sure. Upcoming projects. We've got our County Road 68 bridge replacement in Elmwood Township that'll be firing up here fairly soon. We've heard that the paving on County Road 2, east of Comstock, is going to be first on the list. Is that Knife River Materials?
They're thinking on May 17th on starting that project.
Great.
So we got some things already started. County Road 6, south of Rolog that goes to the Becker County line is on the list. We did have a pre-con the other day for County Road 23. That's the landfill road, and I believe that's probably going to start towards the end of May, maybe first part of June. We've got a turn lane construction project with the city of Glendon that'll be bid probably midsummer. Things are progressing really nicely on that one. There's a little bit of right-of-way that needs to be acquired, and I've heard some good things there, so it's nice to hear. County Road 33, I believe we've had, did you have the pre-con on that too?
Yep.
That's the project with City of Holly. That's progressing nicely. That'll take most of the summer because of the size of it.
What about the project that's a continuation?
Right. So as soon as they pave County Road 23, the plan is they will be prepping County Road 8 at the same time. So the gravel that didn't get paved last year on 8 will be getting prepped as they're paving 23, and then they'll just move that paving equipment to 8 and wrap that up as soon as they're done.
What's the estimate?
You have a guesstimate on time on that?
I've asked for a schedule and I haven't gotten one yet. I have been in contact with them quite a bit, and once road restrictions come off, they were gonna give me a schedule.
I don't want it to get pushed to where it's an issue with the beat pile again.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I
So-
hope that it's
so
not something they're doing
just-
at the end of the summer.
Just shooting from the hip, he gave me an estimate towards the end of May or early June.
Is there going to be any detours on the 23 project?
Nope.
The only thing that would detour is maybe when there's a railroad crossing planned for, so when we have that, there'd be a little detour there.
Okay. But when they're actually paving, there'll just be a pilot car, so there will be some delays, but.
Right.
Workload issues. We did recently complete our township maintenance calculations and held meeting with them. That happens every year. Our 5-year construction plan was completed, and we had our meeting at the board meeting because of COVID, so hopefully next year we'll have a separate meeting for that where we can invite folks in for public comment. We got the supply bids and gravel bids approved today. Dust control bids and application and location maps are sent out, and we've been getting a fair amount of calls and different things coordinating on that, which is nice. That'll probably happen here in the next couple of weeks as well. We are starting year 1 of our blue fire number replacement. I think there's like 4,500 blue fire numbers out in the county, and we've been kind of wondering how and when we're going to fit that into the schedule, and I guess we're just going to take a certain quadrant of the county and start replacing them and try to get that done in, I don't know, 5 to 7 years possibly. It's hard to do it all in 1 year and not do your regular signage and replacing on posts and things, but at least we have a little bit of a plan there. We're working with the City of Holly on that project. We are working with the Diversion Authority and a consultant on design for the City of Comstock, and that would be a reconstruction work that's associated with the diversion itself. I'm looking forward to getting that done. That should be a 2022 project. We are still continuing to work with City of Fargo as well as other stakeholders, the Minnesota State Bridge Department and a consultant on that County Road 1 project. Got to figure out exactly what we can do there and what each party is willing to do. And we're going to develop a little bit of a contingency plan if something were to happen, so we can quickly, if something happens where the bridge does fall down, we need to get that thing taken care of. So we're working on contingency plans as well as more geotech investigations there. Justin's been working with City of Glendon, MnDOT, and consultant on that turn lane project in Glendon. That's another one that's got to get done before, this fall so that the school buses and the ag traffic have a safe turn lane to get in and out of Glendon. And we're working on wrapping up our urban reconstruct from last year in the city of Glendon. So that's some of the things that I thought were noteworthy.
All right. Any questions of Dave on his update? Thank you, guys. Yep. Committee reports, short and sweet today, right? Mr. Gross, you want to lead the way?
Last Tuesday, I attended the township meetings at Linden and Riverton Township. I do have to say that both townships had very big concern about the roads being done in those two townships. Wednesday at the Wild Rice Watershed Board meeting, working a lot on the Gooseberry Township, Gooseberry project, where they're trying to get the values of the land along that project decided. Also working on a dike on the north side of Halstead. There again, they approved the one watershed, one plan, which has been approved. And the Clay County, those appointments we've made, they approved those two. I don't know if they needed the approval on it, they just noted that. Thursday, we had the final of the IT interviews, which we already talked about. On Wednesday, also had the building committee, and we went over that plan pretty well today, so. And like I say, Thursday, we had the IT interviews, which already we took care of today, too, so. That's it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Mojo.
Thank you. Last week, I attended the MetroCog committee. We selected a consultant for the interstate operations plans and got a report from the 2021 bicycle pedestrian count. This shows historical over the last 5 years. That report is available on the MetroCog website, and had an update to the transit development plan. I also attended the AMC Extension Committee interviews for the Northwest Regional Coordinator. Those went well, and also fielded some concerns with citizens at the DMV, which I have heard that you will be talking about today, vital discussions, and then had an inquiry from a resident on Sanctuary County for Second Amendment. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Ebinger.
Yes, do want to make reference to, I wasn't at the last meeting, but on the 9th of this month, the Diversion Authority had a press conference with Mayors Carlson, Mahoney, and Darlis, Senator Klobuchar, and Hoban, and Governor Burgum over at Fargo City Hall, announcing the award bid to raise I-29 from North Exit 50 of the Wild Rice River. It was well covered by the media and well attended, and overall, I think was a good way to get the information out. On the 15th, I virtually attended the Substance Abuse Committee. Jason McCoy gave an update on the state flavored tobacco statute, which made it through the House but appears to be stalled in the Senate. Doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. Had some local grants submitted to get community norms programs for DGF and Moorhead schools. Locally, the tobacco ordinance is set to be reheard on May 10th at the Dilworth City Council meeting. Moorhead is still in discussion stage on that. State Tobacco 21 ordinance, there's some issues that have come out of that. New legislation has removed penalties for possession of tobacco if you're under 21. They did that in order to minimize law enforcement contacts with youth. I suppose that was the stated intent. But as a result, they're not able to enforce vaping and possession of tobacco products in the schools because the school resource officers can no longer issue citations. So as a result, you have no penalties or enforcement of the tobacco 21 for people under 21. Jason has proposed that we get a talk group together, and Commissioner Calley and I have both been invited to be part of that with community leaders, maybe some elected city officials, and law enforcement, and hold discussions about, and the school people, hold discussions about possibly the schools referring to people, to the kids who are in possession of a restorative justice program, where maybe there will be some sort of consequences to their actions. At this point, because of the state legislation, there isn't. Rory Bill also gave us an update on the suicide grant, and that completes my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Kaylee.
Thank you. On Friday, the 16th, I attended our Early Childhood Initiative meeting, and the legislators were supposed to join us. Senator Kent Egan was there, but at the last minute, Representative Keeler and Markert were called away to a different meeting. Senator Egan gave us an overview of where things are at in the Senate with proposed supports with regard to childcare and services for young children and related areas. One of the things he talked about was there's a Department of Early Childhood that has been proposed. And what this department would do would consolidate a lot of the regulatory mechanisms within our state for childcare and other early childhood agencies. This would synchronize some of the language that people are using, so we're not calling something different, in different spheres. So it's looking like it's still a possibility, but maybe unlikely that will get passed this year. However, it is the creation of a department, so it's kind of a big deal, and that would have to take place in a budgeting year. So if it does not pass this year, we'd wait for the next budgeting cycle, unless something crazy were to happen. But there's also a discussion on how childcare should be treated as infrastructure, and some of the issues that Greater Minnesota in particular faces in this industry. And that was that meeting. Monday the 19th, I had another meeting with the Historical and Cultural Society of Clay County board members and representatives from the city to try to come to an agreement on the professional service agreement for the HCSEC in the city, and that is still ongoing. That concludes my report.
Thank you. On the 14th, I had the building committee meeting, and that has, we talked a little bit about the storage facility proposal and what's going on there, and then the rest was what Joe presented to you today, to our full board. And we did have our final interview on Thursday, the 15th, for the IT position we acted on today. And then we also, that same day, I also had the West Central Juvenile meeting, of which we went over the main issues regarding that. I do want to point out that one of the other items that we did talk about was James is starting to have a little bit of concern regarding staff retention. There's some potential issues going there, and of course today's environment, it's understandable that there's some concern among some in working in those areas. But he's confident he's okay for now, but it's something that we need to support him on and be watching and monitoring that very closely, so that that doesn't become even a bigger concern. Yesterday, I did Supervisor Tim Brandemill from Oakport Township. There's a party that's interested in doing a little bit of development up on, it's considered Track 3 of the Oakport Joint Powers area. Somebody's interested in some potential storage facilities there, as well as a development, and he requested to meet with us to go over what his plans are, and there's a process that he'll have to follow going through the city for that. And I think you're on the Joint Powers Board now, right now, the Oakport Joint Powers Board. It's something, okay, yeah, so you might become involved with that. That concludes my report. Steve, do you have some things for us?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, I participated in a number of discussions with Kirk Rosenberger on the resource recovery facility. Tuesday, I also spoke with Dan Molly on a series of shared issues. Some of our Strive members begin to meet, Darren and Mark Sloan, for our meeting that we had later this past week. We also had a storage building meeting that I met with Joe and construction engineers. On Wednesday, we had county management. We met with Kathy, heard updates from her. We also talked about campus projects. On the 14th, I also met with Rory Johnson in regards to some issues out at the DMV. Again, we'll discuss that at PIC later this morning. We had a Strive meeting that focused a lot on remote work post-pandemic. We'll have some further discussions on that. Later that afternoon, again, had a resource recovery construction meeting. We're going to begin the full-on meetings on April 26th. I think the invitation went out today. We'll be meeting 1 o'clock in the afternoon, very similar process than when we had with the Law Enforcement Center in the correctional facility. We had a building committee meeting on the 14th that's been addressed, and I also participated in the FM administrators meeting for Cass County, City of Fargo. Talked about shared issues. 15th, we wrapped up the interviews for the IT director that's been addressed. I also participated in the Juvenile Center Advisory Board. That afternoon, I met with AE2S and Dr. Bob Zimmerman in regards to the upcoming MCC JPA meeting. I believe that agenda came out this morning. Commissioners, you should have that. Yesterday, we had some department head evaluation preparation and talked about some space issues out at the Highway Department. And that concludes my report.
All right, Brian, do you have anything today? I apologize. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if maybe I could have Matt Jacobson come up just real briefly. I know we're on time, but he has some information that may be beneficial.
Okay, very good. All right, Matt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Just want to give you an update that the petition to incorporate by for the city of Sterling, that just found out this morning that was denied. There was an order of denial on that. Just want to give you that update. Not entirely sure what next steps would be, if they'll appeal it or if they'll try to go through more of a process for development through the county development code.
All right. Thank you for that update.
Yep.
All right. All right, I apologize for the late meeting, but we had a couple of interesting topics again this morning, and we always need to allow the appropriate time for that. So with that said, we're adjourned.